As we head now to business questions, I will call the Shadow of the House, Lucy Powell.
Beautifully done, Mr Speaker. Could I ask the Leader for the business of the House next week?
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The business for the week commencing the 22nd of January will include, on Monday the 22nd of January, second reading of the Offshore Petroleum Licensing Bill. Tuesday the 23rd of January, Opposition Day, third allotted day, debate on a motion in the name of the official opposition subject to be announced. Wednesday the 24th of January, general debate on defence and international affairs. Thursday the 25th of January, general debate on Holocaust Memorial Day. The subject for this debate was determined by the Backbench Business Committee. Friday the 26th of January, private members' bills. The provisional business for the week commencing the 29th of January includes, on Monday the 29th of January, second reading of the Trade Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership Bill Lords, and on Tuesday the 30th of January, remaining stages of the Media Bill.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and thanks the Leader. First of all, Mr Speaker, I wanted to start by paying my own tribute to my dear and honourable friend, Sir Tony Lloyd. The words spoken about Tony since his passing yesterday, and because they've come from across this House and the political divide, really are a reflection of the special person he was. Kind, sincere, driven by his deep values and principles, working with everyone he needed to further a cause, and always with integrity and humanity. He was also my predecessor as the MP for Manchester Central, and as I said many years ago in my maiden speech, Tony was a brilliant man, first elected in 1983, serving Stretford, then Manchester Central, for 29 years before being elected the Police and Crime Commissioner for Greater Manchester, and then returning to Parliament to serve the people of Rochdale from 2017. I have to say he was an incredibly hard act to follow, and I often find myself in his shadow still. For the first few years, I just had to accept the frequent complaint that I just wasn't as good. Some of my constituents still say, "You know Tony Lloyd, are you?" He was a proud Mancunian, but we did disagree on football as he was a long-standing season ticket holder for United. Boo, boo. We all knew what Tony stood for and the causes he held dear and tirelessly campaigned for, but I can't remember, over all the years I knew him, ever hearing him raise his voice. He went about his politics differently. For him, politics was all about relationships and discussion, whether in this place, internationally, on the street, or in his beloved pub. That's what earned him so much loyalty from everyone who knew him, because he was such a thoroughly nice bloke. My thoughts are with his family, friends, and his staff at this difficult time. Mr. Speaker, Tony was not afraid to champion little heard or unpopular causes, such as his campaigning on mesothelioma. And one of his very last acts just this week was to join over 100 members and peers and the Right Honourable Member for Hull North in calling for urgent action on infected blood compensation. We have raised this issue many times in business question, Mr. Speaker, but given Brian Langstaff's statement issued yesterday, it needs raising again, and I heard questions on it in Cabinet Office questions before us. Sir Brian, the chair of the inquiry, has unfortunately delayed publication of the final report to May. However, he also made absolutely clear that his final report on the compensation scheme has already been published in April last year, and this aspect of the inquiry and its findings will not change. Given this, can I ask the Leader once again to arrange for a statement from the Cabinet Office on establishing the compensation scheme? She and the Government cannot keep hiding behind the final report or complexity when the Chair has made crystal clear his recommendations on this scheme are now published. And I have to say, Mr. Speaker, the answers that I just heard in Cabinet Office questions just weren't good enough. It felt like dodging, unfortunately, yet the will of this House is clear on this subject. Mr. Speaker, this week I happened upon an article by the Leader of the House on Portsmouth News, bemoaning that nothing seems to work anymore. It was remarkably similar to a big speech she made a year ago this week to the IFG, making similar arguments that ordinary people feel the system is rigged against them. I agree with her, and after the post office scandal, I'm sure many others do. But it did leave me wondering, what is her government doing about it, and who does she think is responsible for it? In a week where Avanti trains are bragging about free money from the taxpayer whilst rail passengers suffer poor services, whose responsibility does she think that is? In a week where the NAO warned the government is wasting tens of billions of pounds on crumbling infrastructure and badly run projects, whose responsibility does she think that is? She says she wants to focus on improving the quality, accountability and accessibility of healthcare. So in a week where it's been reported that the NHS is spending a staggering £10 billion a year on agency staff, whose responsibility does she think that is? And whose responsibility is it that millions of people are waiting longer for treatment and can't access a GP? And before she embarrassingly blames doctors, or in fact Welsh Labour, for the problems of the English NHS, can she be honest about her government's terrible record and tell us what she's doing to fix it?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I know the whole House will soon have an opportunity to pay tribute to our late colleague Tony Lloyd, and people may not know, but the Honourable Lady may not have had an opportunity to do that, and I thank her for her tribute that she has paid today. And can I place on record my deepest sympathies for all who loved him. The tributes paid to him already illustrate the gentle and kind nature he had and the breadth and depth of his public service, and he was still doing that, as the Honourable Lady testified to, right up until the end. Can I also thank the families of those held hostage by Hamas for again coming to Parliament this week to talk about their loved ones. We will all keep them at the forefront of our minds and do all we can to bring them home. And can I remind the House that Kiefer Bibas turns 1 today in captivity. And can I also wish both His Majesty the King and Her Royal Highness the Princess of Wales a speedy recovery. I thank the Honourable Lady for raising the important issue of infected blood again. This session does follow Cabinet Office questions, and there were a number of things that were placed on record, both by the Minister but also by members in this House. I will again remind the House that the compensation study that was established both acknowledging the moral case for compensation, but also that the study should be concurrent to the inquiry, and that the inquiry and the study could make reference to each other, and the reason for doing that was to ensure that we could arrive as swiftly as possible at a compensation package for all those affected by this appalling scandal. I do not disagree with any honourable member that we should not have to wait for this. As the co-chair of the all-party group said in the previous question session, all the information we have to arrive at a compensation scheme in those inquiries the government now has, and that is why the Paymaster General is making progress on doing exactly that. We are acutely aware of that moral imperative and what both the study and the inquiry have said on this matter so far. And this House has also been clear in its desire to see this appalling scandal resolved quickly. I will refer her to what the Minister just said at the dispatch box with regard to legislation, but I am kept regularly informed about progress that the Paymaster General is making with the Treasury and other departments on this matter, and I expect more news to be brought forward in the coming weeks on that very important point. The Honourable Lady refers to my article. Thank you for the publicity. I'm arguing that we should make and ensure that the consumer is king again. We have some very challenging new monopolies, the natural monopolies of water companies, the online giants, and we need to ensure that the the customer is king. And that is what this government has been doing through its legislation to improve competition in this country, and the work we are taking forward with regulators on a whole raft of things, from energy bills to other consumer issues. The reason why we can do that is because we have a plan. We have a plan on all of the issues facing the public. I expect praise from my own benches on a plan, but I was much encouraged at the praise that we saw yesterday from the opposition benches. One Labour member discussing and urging a focus on reducing the backlog and ending hotel use said, I quote, "The Conservatives started this work by employing some temporary new officers and it started to work." She goes on, "The Tories have also started smashing the gangs through the work that they have been doing in France," and she was right. On that priority, she could have added that crossings are down by 36% this year. Albanian returns are down by 90%. The return scheme has seen a 93% fall in arrivals, and we've dismantled, alongside the French, 82 organised criminal gangs. We are making progress on that and other areas. The health statistics that were announced that week show that those waiting list figures are coming down, that the Honourable Lady mentions. These are not easy problems, particularly because of the recovery from the pandemic and also the global situation on prices and supply chains. But we have a plan, and we are methodically working through in doing so, with zero assistance, I would say, from the party opposite. On any issue, on any priority, we are sticking to that plan. And the reason we can do that, and we are not being blown off course, is because we have some principles backing up that plan. Unlike the party opposite, we understand what our duty is to the people of this country, whether it is on infected blood or the Horizon scandal, which we set up those inquiries, or on the people's priorities, which are also the Prime Minister's 5 top priorities. We have never wavered in our duty to the people of this country, in our support to protect its borders and protect the defence of the realm, unlike the Ladies' Party, that has 6 current shadow cabinet members who voted against our continuous deterrent at sea. We are working to strengthen our borders and stop the boats. The Labour Party have voted consistently against that legislation. We have believe in the support of minimum service standards on vital public health services, including health and transport. Labour have opposed that. And we've taken tough decisions on helping the economy, including controlling borrowing, which is why inflation is down by 60% since October, and the OBR forecasts inflation falling to 2.8% this year. Labour's stated policy on fiscal rules and spending mean it will have to raise taxes if it wants to stick to those fiscal rules, but they've not said what and when. On all of these things, we have a plan, and it is working, and we are going to stick to it despite what the party opposite is doing. Labour have no plan, just a big fat bill for taxpayers.
Father House Sir Peter Bottomley.
I agree with a great deal of what the shadow spokesman said about Tony Lloyd, and I agree with much of all of what my right honourable friend has said on party politics and having a plan and delivering for the British people. Next week, the Select Committee on the Holocaust Memorial Bill continues its hearings. It had 3 sessions this week, and transcripts can be made available in the vote office. One of the issues that comes up is the government's continued failure to actually publish the minutes of the Holocaust Memorial Foundation from 2015 to 2016. There was a consultation on a site for the proposed memorial and learning centre. The consultants analysed the responses, shortlisted 3, and 2 days later the government produced an alternative option, which is Victoria Tower Gardens. No one has seen outside the department the comparisons of the merits of Victoria Tower Gardens and other possible sites, and no one has seen the minutes of discussion of changing the specification behind the backs of the public. Can I ask my right honourable friend to look to see the redactions made by the Department for Environment and why they're continuing to instruct lawyers to oppose the Freedom of Information request, which is vital to the work of the Select Committee? And can I, through her, commend to the Select Committee asking for that information and making it public?
The Father House was asking for a debate on it as well, I presume. There we are, Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The My right honourable friend raises this issue most weeks, and I know it is a great concern to him, and he wants to ensure that the final outcome of this process is as good as it can be. I will certainly again make sure that the Secretary of State for Levelling Up has heard what he has said. The next questions are on the 22nd of January, and he may wish to raise it with him directly. This is the kind of information that should be in the public domain so that people can make good decisions. There may be some matters, for example, relating to security concerns, where it is sensible to redact them. But I will make sure that the Secretary of State has heard him again.
SNP spokesperson Deidre.
Mr. Speaker, can I start by associating myself with all the remarks about Tony Lloyd, who I always found a very good and decent man. Mr. Speaker, once again I'm indebted to the Leader of the House. Her eccentric video last week, joking about Tupperware and the Stone of Destiny, excited quite the response in Scotland. Why is she always on about Scotland, they ask? The Tories have given us a joke minister for common sense. Looks like we now have a minister for clickbait. Scotland does seem just a big joke for her. The brief seems clear to rubbish and insult Scots every week in business questions. Of course, she's not alone. It seems to be Tory policy these days. But she's adding value now by writing full-page articles in the papers about how awful Scotland is, along with a new clickbait video every week. All that effort, Mr. Speaker. Of course, given the very bad news for her party in this week's YouGov poll, maybe these joke videos are in fact auditions. Perhaps not so much stand up and fight as stand up comedian. Meanwhile, her own government's record is absolutely nothing to joke about. Destitution rising, doctors on strike crippling the English NHS, sea coasts foul with pollution, inhumane treatment of asylum seekers and the breaching of international law, unresolved scandals piling up, and the crushing impact of one of the worst Tory jokes of all, Brexit. But before we're treated to, or I don't know, perhaps an attack on the Scottish Government and praise for the bullish actions of the Zombie Scotland Office, I mean, surely, Mr. Speaker, Scotland can find a better use for what is it now over 12 million quid than funding that ever-expanding propaganda unit, beavering away behind the scenes, undermining the work of the Scottish Parliament, and, of course, assisting the leader with her scripts each week. But closer to this place, we have the Westminster joke of the other place, with its 860 or so ermine-clad peers, but one notable absentee. The leader's Scottish Tory friend and colleague, Baroness Mone, is currently not a sitting member because she's taken a leave of absence by her own choice. It's being reported in the Daily Record. Baroness Mone claims she's still a Conservative. As far as she's concerned, she never had the whip removed. So can the leader confirm that if Baroness Mone resumes her place in the other place, say tomorrow, as she's entitled to do, I believe, she can sit as a Conservative? If not, exactly when was the whip removed? And can she possibly make time to answer that question before her next reading out of this week's hilarious clickbait script?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, the Honourable Lady should thank me. I've been giving the Honourable Lady publicity that money cannot buy. And it is, I think it is encouraging that we have generated such a following, such an interest, Mr. Speaker, in what goes on in this chamber at business questions. Let me be clear to the Honourable Lady. I'm not talking Scotland down. I'm talking the SNP down, that have been an unmitigated disaster for Scotland. The stoicism of the Scottish people in dealing with the inept government that they have in Scotland deserves great credit. The Honourable Lady sort of invites me each week to, she talks about our record on delivery and always invites me to make that comparison. Let me try and do so this week without mentioning the appalling record of the SNP, and just invite people to contrast our record with theirs, whether it be on, in the UK, the largest rail infrastructure investment since Victoria times, or massive regeneration projects across the UK, or over 1,000 miles of major roads refurbished compared to the A9, please. Or the 20 times offshore wind capacity that we have generated since we've been in office, or 18 million households with full fibre broadband. How is their broadband rollout going? Hospitals, mental health facilities, 50 new surgical hubs, new nuclear power stations, record investments in home and flood defences, and in the coming financial year, our R&D spend will be about £20 billion. In 2010, then the SDSR green-lighted a couple of aircraft carriers. 6 years later, one was commissioned. That's a 65,000-tonne complex warship built through the Carrier Alliance, a wonderful example of the UK supply chain working together. In that same time frame, the SNP in 6 years are still building a couple of ferries. They are £308 million over budget. For context, that overspend figure is 3 times the original budget. And now I understand that these pioneering green vessels are going to run on diesel. The SNP government has been an unmitigated disaster for Scotland. They've been found out. They are incapable, incorrigible, and now they are in trouble. With regard to her final question, this is the House of Commons. Those are matters for the House of Lords.
Sir Christopher Chope.
Mr. Speaker, next week the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe will be meeting in Strasbourg, which means that members of the UK delegation won't be here for the tributes to Tony Lloyd. But latterly he was a really effective and diligent member of that assembly, and I hope that we'll be able to make our tributes out in Strasbourg. And we miss his charm and humanity. And as one of the people who was first here in 1983, I had the privilege of knowing him for a very long time. Can I ask my right honourable friend whether she will initiate a debate into the effectiveness or otherwise of the integrated care boards? The whole rationale for those boards was it was going to deal with the interaction between health and social care and reduce the incidence of bed blocking. Last week, we heard that in Dorset, there are no fewer than 353 beds in hospitals in Dorset occupied by people who don't need to be there. The cost is over £100,000 per day, let alone the opportunity cost of missed operations and all the rest. This is intolerable, and it just shows that this system of integrated care is not working. Can we have a debate on it?
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for getting on record his beautiful tribute to Tony Lloyd, and I think it would be wonderful if such tributes could also be played out in Strasbourg. He is absolutely right. It is vitally important that commissioners are held to account. Our NHS will not be functioning properly unless there is accountability and I believe also choice within the NHS. The former Secretary of State for Health undertook a piece of work that we can now look at the patient outcomes data and the quality of commissioning that is taking place in each board and actually across the whole of the UK, and that will help drive accountability. And now we have that data, I'm sure that it will make for a very interesting debate. He will know how to apply for one, and he may also wish to raise this matter with the Secretary of State on the 23rd.
Chair of the Backbench Committee, Mearns.
Very grateful, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, can I add my condolences to the family and friends of Tony Lloyd. Certainly last night, even in the local that I frequent in Kennington, Tony was remembered with great fondness by the regulars there, and the manager, who's also a friend of mine, asked to be known that he really did respect and loved and missed Tony Lloyd, who will be missed by all around the house. He was probably, Mr. Speaker, the nicest Manchester United supporter that I've ever come across. Now, Mr. Speaker, I thank the Leader of the House for announcing the business for next week and the backbench business on Thursday. There will also be a Select Committee statement from the Procedure Committee on the common scrutiny of Secretaries of State in the House of Lords. And if we're allocated the time, Mr. Speaker, on Thursday, the 1st of February, the two debates that we have lined up would be one on miners and mining communities and one on freedom and democracy in Iran. And we are also approaching the laying of supplementary estimates, and the committee will be publishing information soon on the application process for a day of debates in the Chamber. And the committee is very, very keen to receive Westminster Hall debate applications, particularly for Thursday, Mr. Speaker. Now, Mr. Speaker, I want to apologise to the Leader of the House because I did raise last week the question of the Tyne Bridge, and I raised it again in Prime Minister's questions yesterday. But it is a matter of urgency, and I'll quickly explain why that is. The Tyne Bridge and surrounding buildings are the furthest inland settlement place for kittiwakes to nest. And if we don't get the work started before the kittiwakes return from their wintering, it'll then become increasingly difficult because it will mean disturbing kittiwake nests. And we don't want to be doing that. We want to get on with the work. So there is urgency from an environmental perspective, but also from a financial perspective. The work really does need to be started as soon as possible, Mr. Speaker. So I would thank the Leader of the House for writing to the Department for Transport on my behalf last week, but I would like to understand the urgency of why we're doing that. And I do apologise, Mr. Speaker, I will be missing next week. I'm on select committee business.
Priorities, of course. Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, can I thank the honourable gentleman for, again, his very helpful advert to all members for forthcoming debates. I will ensure that the Secretary of State for DEFRA has also heard his concerns about that particular bridge and will, again, ask the Department of Transport to lean in.
Dame Caroline Downey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Can I also add my voice in tribute to Tony Lloyd? He was a good man who never underestimated or undervalued the extreme power of kindness. The Leader of the House will have seen last month's judgment in the case of the Duke of Sussex versus Mirror Group Newspapers Limited, which records that witnesses for MGN accepted that in 2007 a previous Culture, Media and Sport Committee was misled by then executives at the Mirror to conceal the illegal and unlawful activities that were going on. The individual accused of misleading the committee died in 2022, Mr. Speaker. Will the Leader of the House nonetheless agree with me that any attempts to mislead committees are unacceptable, but especially those from media organisations for whom the public and Parliament should expect honesty and integrity? And will she commit to keep the important issue of select committee powers under review so that committees like mine can continue to operate without obstruction?
Leader.
Well, can I thank the Right Honourable Lady for her question. The powers and privileges of this House are necessary to be able to have Parliament function freely and fully, and it is vital that the work of select committees in that work are able to obtain full and accurate evidence from witnesses as part of their inquiries. That is critical. The powers available to this House and select committees has been under continual review, and it's also been investigated numerous times in the past decades. It is, of course, very frustrating when witnesses are not cooperative with select committees, and the government supports this House in asserting its powers to ensure it can scrutinise effectively.
We're a Hobart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I say how sad we are on the Liberal Democrat benches that Tony Lloyd passed away. I was a councillor in Rochdale when Tony first became the first Police and Crime Commissioner in Greater Manchester. He was such a decent man and a sincere politician and public servant. Mr. Speaker, warm and comfortable homes are crucial to reach net zero and lower energy bills. People should be encouraged to invest in energy-saving measures. However, a complicated certification landscape means it is difficult to find qualified and reliable installers. A review of this has been recommended by the Competitions and Market Authority and supported by which? Can we have a debate in government time on consumer protections in the green heating and insulation sector, please?
Well, can I thank the Honourable Lady for her very important question. The Competition Markets Authority is doing important work in a number of areas, that being one. Also, petrol retail, for example, that we have had announcements on in the last week. I shall certainly make sure that the Secretary of State has heard her concerns about this particular area.
Damien Moore.
Speaker, Southport Pier has been a significant feature of our town's life for over 163 years until it was closed by Sefton Council in December 2022. Given the significance of piers to many towns around the country, particularly the economic impacts that they can have, would my right honourable friend agree to have a debate on the significance of this, how they can be restored and maintained for future generations?
Leader.
Well, the government very much recognises the importance of these often much loved heritage assets. It's why, in addition to the Coastal Communities Fund, it had a particular part of the fund that was there to renovate heritage buildings, particularly piers and lidos, and we have done that. We have renovated an enormous amount of those types of structures across the UK. what is even sadder than what the honourable gentleman says about this pier closing is that it received £2 million through the Coastal Communities Fund and has only a few years ago undergone a £2.7 million enhancement. So I think there are questions about the use of that public money and what his local authority is doing.
Alice Cunningham.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I want to alert the Leader of the House to action by a private security firm on the Wynyard estate in my constituency to stop legitimate political campaigning. No. There are thousands of homes on the estate, but Chris MacDonald, who I hope will succeed me as the Labour MP for Stockton North, was ordered to leave the area by guards. He was told that they didn't allow cold collars, and that was how they categorised Labour activists. The Leader of the House will recognise this as anti-democratic and denies thousands of people the right to hear from those who would seek to represent them. I'd be obliged if she could use her offices to investigate this silencing of politicians and make it clear that people of whatever political colour should not be stopped carrying out perfectly legal activities.
Leader.
Well, I shall certainly make sure that the Cabinet Office have heard the particular case that the honourable gentleman refers to. I often think that there is sometimes a misunderstanding about the function that whether it's local councillors or members of Parliament do when they're going door to door trying to find issues. There is certainly areas which local authorities, particularly which have a high volume of quite vulnerable people in them, where there are these cold calling zones in place, and that is perfectly proper. I will certainly raise it with ministers, but I would also encourage honourable members to address this directly and locally. Quite often, I think these things are misunderstandings, and quite often, if you say that you're going to a particular area and what the business is you're doing, then hopefully these incidents won't arise. But I will make sure the minister's heard him.
Martin Vickers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I add my words of condolence to the family of Tony Lloyd? I served with him on the International Trade Committee, and he always made a valuable contribution and will be sadly missed. Mr. Speaker, the RAC have recently published a report calling on the government to commission an independent inquiry into headlight glare. Members will be aware that headlights on vehicles now are much brighter with LED lights, and certainly in my constituency, where the local paper, the Grimsby Telegraph, have carried a report on this, it is clearly a concern to many of my constituents. So could we have a statement from a Transport Minister as to whether the government are intending to commission such a review?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for raising this very important matter. I know this is a concern to many people, which is why the RAC has highlighted this issue. He will know that provisions for vehicle headlamps currently, there is a maximum minimum light intensity, light pattern specifications, and also the position on the vehicle. This is a very highly regulated area. He can raise this directly with the Secretary of State on the 8th of February, but I will also make sure that the Secretary of State is aware of the survey and what the RSC has said, and I thank the honourable gentleman for his campaign.
Clive.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'll be here to pay tribute to my friend Tony Lloyd at the appropriate time. The Hillsborough inquiry, the Horizon post office scandal, Windrush, contaminated blood, LGBTQ veterans have all had reports, and they're all examples of how the state treats working class people when they are in need of, when the state should be there to support them. The last three of those are still waiting for their compensation to be sorted out. Horizon, Windrush, contaminated blood veterans, they're waiting for their reports to be enacted. Can we have some form of cross-party arrangement where we can all come to an agreement on how we should respond to these reports and treat these people with the dignity to which they're entitled? Because the government is just obfuscating, pushing it, kicking the can down the road. We know we're at the fag end of the government, but these things need dealing with now. So why can't we just have some cooperation to bring these matters to a conclusion for these people?
Leader.
Well, in last week's session, I think I spoke about many of the inquiries and issues that the Honourable Gentleman has raised, and I am very proud of this government's record in bringing, for the first time in some instances, inquiries into such matters and making public apologies on behalf of the state in a number of areas where he has raised issues. I shan't repeat what I've said about the legislation and progress on infected blood as I did earlier, but what I will repeat is my statement that I ended my evidence to the infected blood inquiry as to why this is so important, not just to a comparatively small group of people who have been affected or infected in that particular case, but why it matters to all of us, because in that instance it could have been any one of us, anyone in the country that could have been affected by these matters. How the state responds to these things is incredibly important, and we all want to see justice done. I wrote last week to the Cabinet Office talking about how we could learn lessons from the series of inquiries that we had set up. I know that the Paymaster General is in regular touch with the all-party groups who are primarily concerned with those issues the Honourable Gentleman raises. He is in regular touch, for example, with the Honourable Lady from Hull, and of course all these things are having consultations and inputs from very many people in this House and other stakeholders. We are determined to get these long-running injustices resolved. That has been our track record. That has been very visible. And particularly on infected blood, I admitted that there is a moral case for obligation when I was Paymaster General, set up that compensation study, and we will deliver on it, I hope with support from members opposite.
Yeah. Dean Russ.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I also send condolences to the family and friends of Tony Lloyd? I can't say I knew him personally well, but I knew him well within this place. And he was not just well respected, but he was well liked, which is quite hard for a politician of such tenure. But also he was known to be very, very kind, and I think the immeasurable difference he made to this place will last for generations. Mr. Speaker, I recently spoke to a constituent who was concerned about fraudsters knocking on doors, dressed as if they will work from a commercial business, with the intention of scamming usually vulnerable residents. And so could my right honourable friend advise on how this issue could be addressed to ensure residents could feel more safe when opening the doors to people who are supposedly selling to them? Thank you.
Leader.
Can I start by saying how good it is to see my honourable friend in his place again, fit and well. We heard earlier from a member opposite about cold calling zones and measures that are put in place to protect particularly a high volume of vulnerable people in place. That is one solution to addressing the problem that the Honourable Gentleman raises. It is within the gift of local authorities to do that, and that may be something his residents would wish to see. I will, of course, also ask on his behalf the relevant department if there's any good practice that can also be passed to the Honourable Gentleman's office.
Lillian Greenwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Time and again, the government has ignored warnings of the crisis brewing in adult social care, children's services and homelessness, which combined with rising costs is pushing local council finances over the brink. The result is that from lunch clubs to libraries, art groups to youth centres to supported bus services, communities are losing the things that bring people together and support their lives. Can we have a debate in government time on the impact that this loss of social infrastructure is having on communities, and particularly on the old, the young, the sick, the disabled and those already facing extreme poverty?
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady for her question. She will know how to apply for a debate in the usual way. But I also would just draw her attention to the local government finance settlement and the offer from the Secretary of State and his ministers to discuss that with members if they wish to. I would urge her to take him up on that offer if she so desires. I would also point to the work and focus across many government departments on the issues that the Honourable Lady raises, both particularly in the Department of Health, but also the work that my honourable friend, my right honourable friend, the Minister for Veterans, has been undertaking, particularly with regard to homelessness.
Jo Gideon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week I met my constituent Kim Ledgar, a former sub-postmistress and former representative of the National Federation of Sub-Postmasters. I was already appalled, but am now incensed by the stories that the victims of the Post Office Horizon scandal have to tell. I welcome the government's commitment to complete the process of exonerations and resolve outstanding compensation claims as soon as possible, but those responsible need to be held accountable. Does my right honourable friend agree that the government should learn from victims of this appalling miscarriage of justice, and will she find parliamentary time to debate the introduction of a whistleblowers bill to protect brave citizens who speak out against corporate wrongdoing in the future?
Leader.
Well, can I thank the Honourable Lady for the work that she is doing on that matter? And of course, her question comes in a week when we have also seen on other issues, other previous whistleblowers, such as Maggie Oliver, for example, and the work that she did on grooming gangs at tremendous personal cost to herself, losing her career and livelihood in the process. We owe these individuals a huge debt of gratitude, and I will certainly make sure that the Cabinet Office have heard what she has said. As I mentioned, I wrote last week asking the Cabinet Office to reflect on what it could learn from both Horizon but other inquiries that we had established, and she may wish to raise this directly with the business and trade questions on the 25th of January.
Jessica Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There was no transport bill in the King's speech and therefore no opportunity to update legislation relating to e-scooters and e-bikes, and obviously we've seen a massive increase in their use. So on behalf of constituents who regularly raise with me their anti-social use, can we have an opportunity to question ministers on what more ministers can do to tackle this?
Well, can I thank the Honourable Lady for her question? I know this is an issue of concern to many members across the House. She will know how to apply for a debate, but I will also make sure that both the Secretary of State for Levelling Up Local Government and the Minister for Transport has also heard what she has said.
Dr. Luke Evans.
This House will know I've repeatedly raised my concerns about image and performance-enhancing drugs. It's estimated between 500,000 and 1 million people are using these drugs. So can I pay tribute to the Sports Minister, who's agreed to have a round table with me next week to bring together academics, clinicians, groups and the police to discuss this further, because we need more data. One biggest problem is it's a cross-departmental issue. So would the Speaker mind writing to the Home Office and the Health Department to pay attention to this issue, as well as the Department of Sport, to make sure this really gets the attention it deserves?
Well, I'm sure that the Deputy Speaker would mind writing, but I don't at all. And I thank again the honourable gentleman for this really important campaign, which was an area which did not have a lot of focus on it prior to the honourable gentleman taking that up. I'm very pleased to hear what the Sports Minister is doing, and I will certainly make sure via him that this is being coordinated across government.
Chris Elmore.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. On the 12th of April, Barclays Bank will close its doors in the county town of Bridgend, leaving 145,000 constituents in my constituency and in the constituency of Bridgend with one fewer bank. In my own constituency, Mr. Deputy Speaker, there is now one bank left. Within the town of Bridgend, there is increasing problems in older people, charities and access to cash. Can the leader find time for a debate where a minister will come to the House and set out what the government will do to stop this desert of banking services so that we can ensure that people do have access to cash and our much-pressed charity sector is able to bank and have support from within their towns right across the United Kingdom.
Well, I'm sorry to hear about the situation in the Honourable Gentleman's constituency. He will know that the Department for Levelling Up has a number of programmes to ensure that vital services, such as those that he outlined, are coordinated locally and people still have access to those services. He is right, both for charity sector in particular, but also businesses and individuals. These are important and necessary services people should have access to. So he will know that just because bricks and mortar may be going, these services can be continued in other ways, and that happens in many other places around the UK. I will make sure that someone from that department gets in touch with the Honourable Gentleman's office, shares the good practice that is going on, and gives him some advice about how he can ensure that these services are available to his constituents.
Andrew Bridgen.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. In Tuesday's 90-minute Westminster Hall debate on trends in excess deaths, backbench contributions were limited to 3 minutes each, Mr Deputy Speaker. Given the huge and growing public interest and concern around excess deaths and growing awareness across this House, could we now have a debate on excess deaths in government time? And also, will the government instruct the Medicines and Healthcare Product Regulatory Agency to release anonymise the doses, dates and deaths data that they hold, which they've already disclosed to AstraZeneca, Pfizer and Moderna, public data that the public have no right to, and data which would very quickly verify whether these experimental COVID-19 vaccines are in fact safe and effective?
Well, I thank the Honourable Gentleman for his question. The fact that he has held a debate in this place and that it was well attended, I think shows that there is great scrutiny and interest on these matters. He will know he has other options in which to apply for a debate. He is sat next to the chairman of the Backbench Business Committee, and some of the things that he has said in his question would, I'm sure, be considered very favourably, mean that his application would be considered very favourably. So I'd encourage him to apply for a debate. He knows that he can obtain a debate because he has just recently had one on that subject. I would also just emphasise that there is no evidence linking excess deaths to the COVID-19 vaccine. Analysis from the Office of National Statistics published in August last year shows that people who have had a COVID-19 vaccine have a lower mortality rate than those that have not been vaccinated. The issue of excess deaths is important to scrutinise. Clearly, the COVID inquiry is looking at these issues too, but I think we need to be very careful in our messaging to ensure it's individuals' choice, but people have the facts about vaccines of all kinds.
Deputy Peacock.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Barnsley East has missed out on all Levelling Up funding. The local council has put in an excellent bid to support and develop Elsica Heritage Centre, but in the latest round of announcements we were told it would be decided separately from the national funding round as a culture and heritage bid, yet DLUC do make the decision. So can the leader inform the House when the government will make this announcement?
Well, I wish the Honourable Lady and her colleagues in her constituency good luck with the bid. Quite often she will know if a bid has not been scored to be particularly good in a round of funding. Quite often officials from that department will work with the local authority and other stakeholders to improve the bid and make sure it is robust. I'm not saying that's the case in the Honourable Lady's case, but it is good that she is still in the process. I will do all I can to assist her in making sure that the bid is in good shape, and I shall ask the Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport to give her an update on timing, as the next question session for that department has not been dated yet.
Drew Hendry.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. As can be amply demonstrated by this week, the Highlands and Islands have the coldest climate. We have the highest levels of fuel poverty, pay the highest bills across the UK, despite generating 6 times the electricity that we use. Energy policy is entirely reserved to the Westminster Government. So can we have a debate in government time on establishing a Highland energy rebate along the lines of what the Chancellor has proposed for those on new electricity generating equipment areas, for those living amongst the existing electricity generating equipment?
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. I shall certainly make sure that the Secretary of State for Energy Security and Net Zero has heard his suggestion today, as the questions for that department have not been dated yet. And I will ask that he get a response from the department.
Ashley Dalton.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Given that there's a debate later today on HS2 compensation, and Skelmersdale in my constituency of West Lancashire has repeatedly been denied any support for a train station, which it still infamously has none. Will the Leader of the House share her thoughts on the DfT Network North advert that boasted 235 million of rerouting of HS2 funds from the north to fix potholes in London?
Well, I thank the honourable lady. I'm not sure I have seen this this government advertisement, so I can't comment on that. If this is a matter of concern to her constituents with regard to HS2 compensation, I would encourage her to attend the debate this afternoon.
Tom Desi.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. My Slough constituent is one of 6 British Sikhs on an enemies of the state hit list of 20 broadcast on certain sections of the Indian media. We've had the shocking revelations by the Canadian Prime Minister of an assassination of a Sikh activist, an indictment submitted in a US court of a foiled alleged assassination plot of a Sikh activist there. And the family of a Birmingham Sikh activist, with their suspicions, are calling for an inquiry into his death. All 3 were on that hit list. So does the Leader of the House agree with me that given that many Sikhs have been handed threat to life notices by UK police, whether or not we agree with someone's views, everyone has the right to freedom of expression in our democracy without threat of violence? And can she outline what steps the government is taking to ensure the safety and security of British Sikhs?
Well, I'm sorry to hear the situation for the honourable gentleman's constituents. He will know that the Home Office and the FCDO take these matters very seriously. He will know that the Foreign Secretary and his ministers, where there are issues with foreign governments, will raise them directly in bilateral meetings, and that the Home Office, working quite often with local authorities, will put in place measures to protect people who have had such threats. And we've seen this from, very sadly, a number of state actors, interference in some cases from China, Iran in particular, as well as cases the honourable gentleman is referring to.
Debbie Abrahams.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Could I also add my condolences to Tony Lloyd's family? He was a dear friend and colleague, and he was particularly kind to me when I was first elected in a by-election 13 years ago. Mr Deputy Speaker, my constituent's partner has been awaiting evacuation from Gaza for months now. Her partner has evidence that others in exactly the same circumstances as he are being prioritised before him. Although my office and I have been in almost daily contact with the Foreign Office, and I thank Lord Ahmed for his support here, but also the Israeli and Egyptian embassies, I'd be grateful if the Leader of the House could liaise with the Foreign Office and identify exactly when my constituent's partner can be brought home.
The House.
Well, I'm very sorry to hear about the situation in the honourable lady's constituency, and thank my noble Lord Ahmed for the work that he is doing. I know that he is very focused on ensuring the protection of British nationals and ensuring that people can be returned back to the UK and offer all assistance to them. I will certainly make sure that ministers have heard what the honourable lady has said today. I am, as I have with cases with regarding hostages, I have helped facilitate some services being stepped up for members of Parliament. I think I'm not able to perhaps assist the Honourable Lady in quite the way she wishes me to, but what I will do is ensure that the Foreign Office has heard what she has said today, and I will also, I know she's in contact with them already, but just raise those concerns with FCDO officials to see if anything further can be done. I know the Honourable Lady appreciates these are very, very difficult circumstances.
Alistair Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. The House will recall that on the 2nd of January, the Prime Minister posted on X, "I said that this government would clear the backlog of asylum decisions by the end of 2023. That's exactly what we've done." In fact, it was pretty soon apparent that it has done nothing of the sort, with over 4,500 legacy applications still awaiting a decision. I accordingly took this matter to the UK Statistics Authority, seeking their guidance, and I've received this morning a reply from their chair, Sir Robert Chope. He writes, "The average member of the public is likely to interpret a claim to have, quote, cleared a backlog, end quote, especially when presented without context in social media, as meaning that it has been eliminated entirely." He goes on to say this episode may affect public trust when the government sets targets and announces whether they have been met in the other policy domains. So can I ask the Leader of the House if she might make time available for the Prime Minister or the Home Secretary to come to the House and explain why, yet again, they have had their knuckles rapped for their use of statistics.
Well, thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. It is a good thing in our democracy that we don't mark our own homework. We have independent bodies that review statistics, and we also have bodies that look at how statistics are presented so that they are presented in the clearest way possible to members of the public. He will know that there has been massive progress made in that area. I think, and he'll forgive me, but off the top of my head, I think the processing in the Home Office of applications has increased by 250%. They are now working through these applications at pace, but I will certainly make sure that the Home Office have heard what the Honourable Gentleman has said today, as their question time has not been tabled yet.
Mr Shalami.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I raised this issue last week, and the Leader of the House may be aware of an open letter signed by actors, musicians and campaigners from Adrian Lester, Annie Lennox, Martin Ford, Baroness Doreen Lawrence, in pushing and urging the government to go faster on the Windrush compensation scheme. Over 40 people have died, still waiting for compensation. Can we have a government debate and government time on looking at the Windrush compensation, taking that out from the Home Office into an independent body so that we can get speed and a resolution for the many people still waiting?
I thank the Honourable Lady for her diligence in raising this issue again. She will know last week that I wrote on her behalf to the Department, and also I wrote to the Cabinet Office to see what more they could do in terms of learning from this and other matters. I will do so again, and I thank the Honourable Lady for raising the issue.
Kevin Brennan.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Can she have another go at improving ministerial written answers? I recently asked a very simple question to the Levelling Up Department about what meetings they had with Welsh and Scottish counterparts on the new Ombudsman scheme implementation, and the answer I got from the member for North East Derbyshire was ministers and officials have regular engagement with the devolved administrations on a range of issues. Now that does pass the Lloyd George test in that it was short, accurate, and told me absolutely nothing I didn't know already. Can't we, in this day and age, at least have a culture amongst ministers to answer perfectly straightforward, factual questions in a perfectly straightforward and factual way? And will she help to facilitate that, please?
Well, the Honourable Gentleman will know that a great deal of time and effort is taken with the drafting departments in government departments. The Noble Lord True and I run regular training sessions. My officials in my office run regular training sessions, and we are always on the lookout for good and bad practice so that we can ensure people know what members of Parliament need, and also just inform those individuals what is helpful to us in dealing with casework and the format that we might need information in. I am always open to examples of both good and bad practice being passed to my office, and I will certainly raise it with the relevant department.
Meg Hillier.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Mr Deputy Speaker, twice in questions today, compensation schemes have been raised. And I'm heartened that the Leader of the House herself, as Paymaster General, championed this issue and is in contact again with the Cabinet Office. But could she help me and my constituent, who was in the Secret Services, was dismissed because of his sexuality alone, and is one of a group of people who cannot talk about this matter publicly. And despite my hammering on doors in Whitehall, we are making very little progress. Would she take up, as well as the gay veterans and other compensation schemes, this issue for people who served their country well and were dismissed simply because they were gay or lesbian? It is not fair, it was not right, and it needs redress.
Well, I think the Honourable Lady raises a very important point, and quite often, because of the nature of someone's service, they aren't able to participate in particular inquiries or reports that are produced on historic wrongdoing and miscarriages of justice. Clearly the agencies have evolved over the years, and the heads of those agencies now are public figures. So I will certainly write to the Cabinet Office and ask them to consider this, copying in both the Home Office and the FCDO, who are primarily the sponsoring departments for those agencies.
Gavin Newlands.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. Tony Lloyd was Shadow Secretary for Northern Ireland when I got my first front bench role as SNP spokesperson for Northern Ireland, and he was extremely welcoming, collegiate and helpful, and for which I'll be forever grateful. So my sincere condolences to his friends and family. Mr Deputy Speaker, I received a letter on Monday from the Minister for Legal Migration stating that Home Office use of the Mutu Erskine Bridge Hotel, which is currently home to 114 asylum seekers, would cease by the end of April. The problem is this was nearly a week after the news had become public and after I'd already met with Mearns to discuss winding down arrangements. All of this after no real community engagement, consultation or even basic communication with the local community at the outset, leaving it to local representatives like me to try and answer questions I had no answers to, along with the abuse and threats to myself and my staff that go along with it. So can we have a debate on Home Office communication with members of this place and where necessary, directly with members of the public?
Well, I'm sorry to hear about that situation, and I will raise it with the Home Office. I would say from my own experience that the Home Secretary's PPS has been very diligent in making sure that members on all sides of this House are kept informed about things that are going on in their constituency. So I'm sure this will be an error if there's been a delay in sending a letter to the Honourable Gentleman. But I will make sure the Minister and the Department have heard.
Andrew Weston.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and may I take my opportunity to associate myself with the comments that have been made about my friend and predecessor as member for Stretford, Sir Tony Lloyd. I will reserve my comments for the appropriate time in the forthcoming weeks, but I did just want to, in light of the comments of the Shadow Leader of the House, send her my solidarity in having experienced unfavourable comparisons with Tony. She is indeed more fortunate than I if she only had that for the first couple of years, because it is something that I continue to experience some 27 years after he ceased to represent Stretford. But Mr Deputy Speaker, my constituent Colin is a retired senior police officer awaiting pension adjustment under the MacLeod remedy. He and many others have made important life decisions on the basis of a promise made by the government's pension administrators for this scheme, XPS, to remediate all retirees by July this year. Without notification and with a website update alone, XPS has now pushed this date back to November of this year. Colin and thousands of others have made life-changing decisions off the back of the information previously provided, and years of hard-earned pension are still outstanding. Yet to date, I understand that not a single retiree has been remediated or indeed one letter sent to any recipient. So could I ask the Leader of the House, if we could have a statement from the Policing Minister on the progress that XPS are making on the remediation of affected police pensions and the steps the government are taking to assure themselves that the legal deadline for adjusting these pensions is met.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. As the next Home Office questions has not been tabled, I will write and make sure that the Minister has heard the honourable gentleman's request.
Mr. Wakeford.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I'd like to put on record my sadness as well for the loss of our dear friend and colleague, Sir Tony Lloyd. As the Shadow Leader had said, he was a thoroughly decent bloke, kind, but more importantly, a great conversation over a pint. Especially when you're talking about the losses of Manchester United at the moment, for which we both shared that depression. But more importantly, this place and politics is much poorer without him. Mr Deputy Speaker, this week I met with the Environment Agency on behalf of concerned residents regarding the odour coming from the Portsmouth South landfill site in my constituency of Bury South. The Environment Agency serves an important function to all our constituencies, particularly around areas such as flooding, with a job of balancing the needs of people and of the environment. Therefore, can I ask the Leader of the House if we could have a debate in government time on the appropriate level of funding for the Environment Agency and ensuring it has enough teeth to monitor and potentially punish operators who breach these licences?
I'm sorry to hear about this ongoing issue in the honourable gentleman's constituency. He will know that that is the purpose of the Environment Agency, and they do have quite considerable powers, investigatory powers, but also with other bodies the ability to sanction particular people as well. The next questions to the relevant department are on the 1st of February, and the honourable gentleman may wish to raise that there.
Mary Glendon.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Honourable members who have visited the Iraqi Kurdistan with the APPG and know it is a firm ally against extremism will be disgusted that the Iranian regime has targeted the capital, Erbil, with missiles, killing a prominent businessman, his baby daughter and others in a vile and illegal act. May we have a debate in government time on how the government can best assist our allies and support Iraq's complaint about Iranian aggression at the UN, and could she prompt the Foreign Secretary to discuss this with the Kurdish Prime Minister in Davos?
I will certainly make sure that the Foreign Secretary has heard what the Honourable Lady has said today. She will know that the next Foreign Office question is on the 30th of January, and she may wish to also raise it there. But I thank her for drawing a spotlight on that particularly brutal attack. Again, very consistent with the Iranian regime's standard operating procedure in many places around the world.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. The former Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Member for South West Norfolk, has been trying recently to sell demining equipment to the People's Republic of China, which includes ground-penetrating radar capability. The sale was blocked by the government, but it brings into view a proposal that was made this time last year by the 4 existing committees to make the Committees for Arms Export Controls a dedicated select committee of the House. This proposal was supported, it included the chairs of the Defence Committee and the Foreign Affairs Committee, both Conservative MPs. If they support making the Committees on Arms Export Control a dedicated select committee of this House, why doesn't she?
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his question, and the advert that the systems that the government has put in place to ensure that sales which should not be taking place are blocked is alive and well and working. And sitting next to me on the bench is the Security Minister, who has stood up new infrastructure in Whitehall to ensure that we have full situational awareness on whether it is particular sales or takeovers that might be against the public interest. That has come on leaps and bounds in recent years, and I thank him for the endorsement and advert for that. There are many issues to be considered when new select committees are being stood up. They are ultimately a matter for the House, but I can tell him from my experience of serving on the Arms Export Control Committee, which, for those that do not know, does not decide arms exports. It scrutinises decisions taken, that the input from 4 select committees of this House, and that expertise is incredibly valuable with regard to live issues and the geopolitical situation that needs to be considered when scrutinising such decisions, is incredibly valuable. But ultimately, these things are a matter for the House.
Jeff Smith.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. It's now over 2 years since the Honourable Member for Chatham and Aylesford produced her fan-led review of football. The government have accepted most of the recommendations. In that time, several communities have faced losing their local club, and the longer we wait, the more that's going to happen. So when are we finally going to see the football governance bill, or are we going to have to wait for a Labour government to take action on this issue?
Well, given that the Labour government didn't take action on this issue, I don't think the honourable gentleman should hold out for that prospect. We have taken the decision to focus on this matter. We set up the football governance review that my honourable friend, the former sports minister, took forward, and we are bringing forward legislation. I'm expecting that legislation to come to the House very soon, and I thank members from all sides of the House and supporters of all clubs for all the input that has gone into that review and the legislation which has come from it.
Richard Bergen.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I did want to put on record that, like others, I miss our friend and colleague Tony Lloyd so much. He was a public servant of the highest order and a socialist of wit, wisdom, integrity and public service, and we will miss him. Mr Deputy Speaker, people out there in Leeds and across the country are really struggling through no fault of their own to get by. This government says it's proud of their record on living standards, despite the reality out there being very different. So if the government's so confident, can the Leader of the House arrange in government time for a debate on living standards after 14 years of Conservative government? And can we have this as soon as possible before the general election that we need very quickly to let the people out there have their verdict?
Well, the honourable gentleman will know how to apply for a debate, and if he did so, I'm sure it would be very well attended, certainly by members on the government benches. He will know that the cost of living package that we put in place recently, because of the situation that we've gone through with the pandemic and the shocks to particularly fuel prices that's happening in part because of the war in Ukraine, is now over £104 billion. I'm very proud of the record that we have in place, not just for the support that we have given directly. I draw him to the uplift on housing allowance, other benefits, the triple lock for pensions that were announced in the autumn statement, but also what we have done to double people's personal tax allowance. We believe that the best way that we can support people, as well as providing a strong welfare system and that targeted support, is also by ensuring that we get more people into work and that we are able to have more high-value jobs. That is sitting behind our trade deals. CPTPP in particular will increase wages in this country in particular sectors, but it is also absolutely fundamental we get people into work. We have managed to get an additional 4 million people into work. 2 million are women. A million of those are disabled people who would have not had the dignity of the pay packet had we not brought through welfare reforms, and we had lifted many people out of poverty, including 500,000 children.
Powell Williams.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I join in the early tributes to Tony Lloyd. He was a sincere, decent and kind man, and I think a model to us all in these hard-nosed times. Independence is a viable option for Wales's future, and the status quo is not. Now, those are two of the most striking conclusions of the Independence Commission on the Constitutional Future of Wales, led by former Archbishop Rowan Williams and Professor Laura MacAllister, and whose report is published today. Now, whatever the views across the House and the leaders' views, I think any sensible UK government with a sincere concern for the governance of my country would engage with this change that is already afoot. So will the Leader of the House demonstrate just such a sincere concern by arranging a full-scale debate on the Commission's reports, perhaps around the time of St David's Day on the 1st of March?
Well, I fully understand the honourable gentleman's interest in this matter. On this side of the House, we will always defend the Union of the United Kingdom. We have many services which are devolved. It pains me to see many services that are being run by the Welsh Government being run very badly to the detriment of Welsh citizens, as I know he will appreciate. Waiting lists, I think, are 4 times what they are in England, to give just one example. But we will always defend the Union, and if he applies for a debate, I'm sure many on my side will turn up and do precisely that. It is a sad and sorry state that the most vibrant separatist party in the UK now is not the SNP, it is the Labour Party.
Tricia Gibson.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Last week, in response to my comments, the Leader of the House said that people in England pay lower taxes than people in Scotland, even though 55% of people in Scotland pay less tax than people in England, including as well as the council tax. She added that her government had delivered a balanced budget, even though it has never done so since it came to power, whilst the Scottish Government must, by law, deliver a balanced budget every year. Mr Deputy Speaker, these are matters not of opinion, but matters of fact, and I am sure the Leader of the House had no intention to mislead the House. So will she make a statement to correcting the record?
I will be very happy to correct the record now. A nurse earning £34,000 would pay £4,348 in Scotland compared to £4,286 in England. A doctor earning £50,000 will pay £9,038 in Scotland compared to £7,486 in England, and a head teacher would pay £17,436 in Scotland compared to £15,430 in England. The Honourable Lady needs to go and check the facts before she comes back next week, and I would say that's before I even start talking about the money that the UK Government has given the Scottish Government for businesses in Scotland that the SNP are hanging on to instead.
Jim Shannon.
Deputy Speaker, and thank you to the Leader of the House for this opportunity to ask some questions in relation to freedom of religious belief and persecution across the world. Baha'is, just in this last week, one of the examples is the Baha'i farmers have suffered land seizure by the Iranian government. Again, an indication of the Iranian government's intensifying religious persecution against the Baha'is. Secondly, the recent actions against Christians in Sudan. On January the 12th, the Evangelical Presbyterian Church in Wad Madani, Al Jazeera state was burnt down. And as the Sudanese army accuses civilians of spying for the RSF paramilitary based on ethnic grounds, leading to arrests, torture and killings. Again, I ask the Leader of the House, will she join me and others in denouncing these arbitrary actions in Sudan against Christians and Iran against the Baha'is?
Well, I thank the Honourable Gentleman for what he does every week, but drawing a spotlight on some appalling situations that are happening that don't necessarily get a lot of media attention. These have been themes this week. Many members have spoken in this session, but also throughout the week about the conduct of the Iranian regime, and I thank him also again for shining a spotlight on the ongoing situation in Sudan. I will, as he knows I always do, make sure that the FCDO have heard his concerns.
And can I say as well about Sir Tony Lloyd, North West MP, I've called him Mr North West, caring, honest, decent, a gentleman. Everybody got on with him. He worked with everybody. He was a fantastic man. I was on the Council of Europe with him, a true internationalist. We worked hard together. We had the odd pint together in Strasbourg. Politics and Parliament is the poorer for his passing. Thank you, Leader of the House, for responding to questions for over an hour. We now come to motion number